Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, a.k.a. Y.Y. Jacobson, is one of the most sought-after speakers in the Jewish world today. He lectures to Jewish and non-Jewish audiences on 6 continents and in 40 states. Rabbi Jacobson also serves as teacher and mentor to thousands of students across the globe via his website, theyeshiva.net, one of the largest Torah classes in the world today. But Rabbi Y.Y. didn't start off his career as a speaker, but rather a listener. As an oral scribe of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's talks delivered on Shabbos and Yom Tov when they could not be electronically recorded, young Rabbi Jacobson would focus the entire weight of his attention on the Rebbe's words for hours on end, sometimes over the span of several days, in order to be able to capture the Rebbe's messages and relate them back afterwards.
So Motzei Shabbos, right after Shabbos, I would go into a room in 770, and this room had hundreds and hundreds of lights. It was connected to communities literally all over the world. And I would repeat and review, based on my memory, all the Rebbe's talks to these communities worldwide after Shabbos or after Yom Tov. That was really my speaking, how it began.
These days, even though Rabbi Jacobson finds himself doing more speaking than listening, he essentially sees his role as the same.
I find my role to be a channel of authentic, pristine wisdom that I had the privilege of hearing from the Rebbe and from my teachers.
In this fascinating episode of the Maggid method, we chart Rabbi Jacobson's career as a teacher of Torah and world-renowned lecturer, and the specific things he does to capture the minds and hearts of audiences worldwide.
Of course, I want to say it in a way that is relatable to the audience, a way that touches the heart and mind and soul of the audience. I want to engage the audience. So yeah, we all have our techniques of doing that.
We cover so many topics like how to make your Torah content relevant to your audience.
Sometimes we can share an idea, but it remains a little abstract or a little detached. I always try to make the idea relevant. Relevant means it should resonate deeply in my heart, in my kishkas, in my emotions, almost visceral. You know, the body should be able to feel it.
How to break down the walls between you and your audience and create a sense of intimacy.
Sometimes I find people get up to speak and they almost see themselves as being in a war zone, almost in combat with their audience, like they're fighting for their attention. So they'll start screaming right away or hollering right away.
How to become a better storyteller.
You know, if I tell the story and it's never ending, and I keep on making mistakes, and I'm like, oh no, it didn't happen Tuesday, it happened Monday. Oh wait, no, it happened Tuesday. I don't know when it happened. You know what? Let me check my text. Oh, it happened Sunday. Oh my, do me a favor.
And even how to handle criticism.
Now, I understand the pressure. It's a big audience. You want to make a good impression, but you don't have to be so cruel to yourself. Because if your objective is perfectionism, you are destined to failure constantly.
I learned so much from my interview with Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and I'm sure you will too. So now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson.
Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem Shalom, how are you?
Well, okay, I'm ready to roll.
Talking about that you were a pulpit rabbi for a little while. Is that the case?
Yeah, I was, yeah. If I could say, you know, my career in terms of speaking to audiences didn't begin as a pulpit rabbi. Actually, very, very far from it. It actually began in somewhat of I would say, a unique way, and I can't ask anybody to emulate that, because I myself didn't plan that. I grew up in Brooklyn, in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, in the community of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe would speak on Shabbos and holidays for many, many hours. Obviously, there were no recording devices allowed. It was Shabbos and Yom Tov. During the week, things were recorded. But on Shabbos and Yom Tov, nothing was recorded. But most of the Rebbe's output was on Shabbos and Yom Tov. That's when he would hold what's known in the Hasidic world as a fabrengen, a gathering. And these can go on between 3 and 7 hours. And you're talking about deep, deep talks, really shiurim. And each sikha, each talk could be an hour or half an hour, and it was a self-contained presentation. Could be on Kabbalah, on Gemara, on Rambam, a siyum Hashas, a siyum on a Masechta, a Rashi and Chumash, a Zohar, contemporary events, education, Hashkafa, some pilpul and Halacha, Rishonim, Achronim. You didn't know what was coming.
Did you know how long speak for ahead of time, or it was just
he did not know. He did not know, and the Rebbe didn't give notes. He didn't read from notes, and he didn't give notes. He didn't give Myra McCombs and saying this is what we're going to be discussing today. It was all, you had to be ready spontaneously, and it was almost every single Shabbos. And sometimes Yom Tovim would continue for a few days. For example, if you had Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, so you had Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, he would have a few Farbrengens. So you're talking about 10, 15 hours of material. And again, this is not material of stories. The Rebbe was not a storyteller. Sometimes he would tell a story. It was not. He's talking about an hour talk had contained in it profound themes and ideas: pshat, remez, drur, sod, nigla, halacha, pilpul, kabbalah, chasidus, musa, machshava, hashkafa. So there was a team of chayzrim, oral scribes. It was headed by a man named Rabbi Y.Y, alav hashalom, and they were in charge to memorize and then transcribe all the Rebbe's talks. So when I was a young bacher, this is the last years of the Rebbe's life, I had the privilege of being part of this team. And of being part of this team, I would share after Shabbos, after Yom Tov. They had then it was called a hookup. Today it's a little, strange for people to hear about this, but people all over the world wanted to hear, what did the Lubavitcher Rebbe say on Rosh Hashanah, on Simchas Torah, on Sukkot, on Shabbos, Parshas Vayera, Chanukah, Pur, whatever it is, Shushan Purim. So Motzei Shabbos, right after Shabbos, I would go into a room in 770, and this room had hundreds and hundreds of lights. It was connected to communities literally all over the world: Israel, Australia, South Africa, South America, North America, England, etc., Europe. And people would dial in. This is before there was internet, and besides, if you weren't a big television, if you didn't have a big television station, it was very little access, the access that we have today as we're talking now on Zoom. And I would repeat and review, based on my memory, all the Rebbe's talks to these communities worldwide after Shabbos or after Yom Tov. That was really my career as speaking, how it began. And therefore, as a result, it was really all based on being a loyal student and someone who was trying to absorb as meticulously as possible the wisdom, the passion, the words, the insights of the Lubavitcher Rebbe and share it. And actually, probably the most important focus for me was what's called in Hasidic vernacular, Shmiras Lashon Harav, which means maintaining the original pristine language of the teacher, of the Rebbe in this case. That was the focus. And as much as I could remember and, share this in a structured way, what he said. So that's really...
He spoke. So were you translating when you were trying to
No, it was
maintain?
all Yiddish. The Rebbe spoke in Yiddish and I did it in Yiddish.
Got it.
I shared it in Yiddish. And I still remember at my Sheva Brachas, so one of the people in this team, he was an older Jew, a scholar. He's actually the editor of Chassidus Mevueris. It's a series on Chassidus, like the art scroll of Chassidic literature. His name is Rabbi Leibel Oldtime. And I still remember he spoke at my Sheva Brachas. And I got married a few years after the Rebbe passed away. And he said, till this point, the Chassan was just repeating what he heard from the Rebbe. And that, you can't go wrong, you're just repeating. He says at this point, he's probably going to start developing. So here it's very important to remember to stay anchored and true to the source. And he spoke about, it was Parsha Shlach. I still remember a few decades ago, he spoke about the Meraglim, that, the Meraglim were empowered by Moshe Rabbeinu, but their creativity and their originality took them far away. They deviated. At some point, they had one mission. Moshe just asked them to give him a report of what's the best way of getting into Eretz Yisrael. Instead, they decided that their mission is to decide whether to go into Eretz Yisrael. And that deviation derailed Jewish history and created a catastrophe. So he was telling me, and he was saying, as you try to develop your own path and become original, remain anchored and loyal to your source. It was a very endearing message that I still remember it, I think almost 30 years later. So that's how I began. And the reason I say this is because in many ways, I still try to maintain that. And what I mean is, I don't get up and repeat word for word what I heard from the Rebbe, but essentially, I find my role to essentially be a teacher and a communicator, to be a channel of authentic, pristine wisdom. Of course, I want to say it in a way that is relatable to the audience, a way that touches the heart and mind and soul of the audience. I want to engage the audience. So yeah, we all have our techniques of doing that. But essentially, I see myself as a teacher, as a channel for the wisdom, for the truth of Torah that I had the privilege of hearing from the Rebbe and from my teachers.
Yeah. Well, you answered one of the questions I was going to ask you later, which is you're a repository of stories, of jokes, of anecdotes, of so many different tidbits of fascinating information. And I'm trying to think, how do you hold on to all those? How do you keep them in your head? And I guess part of your job as the choser, what was you must have had a good memory to be able to hold on to 10 hours of information, to give it over Yontif, a 2 or 3 day Yontif later.
Yeah, the job of the choser was to retain information, and also we had to be able to understand it to some degree, because I don't have a photographic memory that I could just take a picture, so to speak, of the words and just repeat it. So it was really a personal. There was an element of integration and internalization. One of the key things that I learned as a choser was to just paraphrase an expression of the Gemara, klei reikon machzik. An empty vessel could contain, even though the Gemara says it in a different context, which means if while I was listening to the Rebbe, I was critiquing his ideas, even in the most positive way. For example, thinking, wow, this is incredible, this is amazing, this is brilliant, this is profound, I love this. I failed my mission, and it was very obvious because it was my experience. It wasn't really listening. Mm-hmm. Listening means a complete and utter suspension of the intellectual ego, including the need to comment, to critique mentally, to be able to say, oh, I got this, I like this, how am I going to share this? And I remember I once did it. I remember the Rebbe was talking. He said something extraordinarily profound, and I said, wow, this is good. Just in my own mind, I just said to myself, in my own mind, mentally, you're listening to somebody and you're like, he's good, I like this, whatever it is. I like complimented the Rebbe in my own mind to myself.
Yeah, and then you're out.
And I lost the sequence. He right away went to another subject, and I lost that connection. And I realized that I could not retain the talk in the same way because I was busy thinking about my reaction to his talk rather than really, really listening. And I learned from that and other experiences, the art of listening is really a very, very, very profound art. And the most important part of that is suspension of any form of self, focusing on how I'm going to absorb the material. It's one of the interesting things, actually, one of the great spiritual masters writes is the reason that children retain so much information. It's fascinating to see the memory of children, right? They remind us things that we said to them. We don't even remember what we said yesterday. They remember what we said so many years ago. And one of the reasons for it is that children, they have this clean slate. They actually listen. When we listen to somebody talk, right? Think about it. Most audiences, when I'm listening to somebody talk, we're listening. Even if we're listening, we're not ADHDing on them. We're actually listening, but it's so often with a narrator critiquing. He's good, he's boring, this I heard, I love this, exceptional, I'm going to use it next week in my Shabbos sermon, whatever it is. I'm not listening, I'm listening to me. The child actually listens. So that's one of the key qualities, I think, in retaining information. It's called bittul, real, so almost a form of self-nullification to be able to tune into the transcendent truth that's being shared with you.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah, that's the Niyar Chadash that the Mishnah talks about, right? That it goes it's indelible.
In Pirkei Avos, the chapter 4, Rebbe says, Elisha ben Avuya says, it's the one time he's quoted in Mishnayos. It's interesting, Elisha ben Avuya, that when you learn Torah with a child, it's like the ink, Diyoiksuv al Nayar Chadash, right? The new paper, the new parchment, or the new papyrus, and an older person, when I learned with a zokin, it's Nayar Machak, it's erased. Actually, talking about a chayzid, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in the summer months, he would teach a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. One of the talks was dedicated to Pirkei Avos. So he asked a very powerful question. He's like, first of all, what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? Everybody knows that children absorb material very well, and older people, it's much harder. Second of all, if he wants to encourage us to teach Torah to our children when they're young, he could say that. Why the need to dismiss someone who's older and wants to learn Torah. I mean, let's say, today we have Jews, like Rabbi Y.Y, he was 40 years old, he never learned. Today we have Jews who are 40, 50, 60, they never learn Torah. They open up a Pirkei Avos and they're like, damaged goods, you're never going to get it anyway. And the Rebbe said something very profound. Really, it's like, it was so touching and very relevant to our discussion. He said the Mishnah is not talking about age only. It's not only talking about chronology, it's talking about an attitude. He says, I can be 80 years old, 90 years old, and still learn Torah as a child. And I could be a 20-year-old and still learn Torah like an old man. He says it's the question of how I show up to the lesson. Do I show up as a child? Do I show up with curiosity, with inquisitiveness, without confirmation bias, without an ego, without stereotypes, without the need to put your words into the filing cabinets of my brain that I have already established? In other words, I have to fit your words into my comfort zone. And if they don't, I have to dismiss you as being a crazy person or a heretic or just irrelevant. Or I can actually be open. I can actually learn something new. I can challenge myself. I can go out of my comfort zones. I could challenge my neural pathways. He says that's what the Mishnah is encouraging you. Even if you're an older person, remain a child when it comes to learning Torah.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So how do you go from choser to rabbi of a shul? How did that happen?
I never fully graduate, and I say this with pride. I never fully graduate of choser till today. What happens is I'm already a yeshiva boy. I'm an older yeshiva bacher, and people start. The Rebbe falls ill. The Rebbe passes away. So I can't be a choser anymore. So and I'm learning. I'm just learning. I'm spending my time learning. Really, the prerequisite of being a choser was we had to try to learn all the time, because again, you never knew what the Rebbe is going to talk about, and if you weren't fluent, you would miss it. And he didn't prepare you. He could be talking about a sugya maseches zvachim, like it wasn't like. He could suddenly be talking about a Mishnah in Uktzin. Suddenly he'll say he's going to make a siyum on Maseches Erevin. Like, okay, so he's going to do a siyum on Erevin according to Pshat, and according to Halacha and Pilpul, and then according to Kabbalah. So there was a lot of learning that was required from the people who were involved in memorizing and reviewing and writing. So after the Rebbe's passing, I was just immersed in my learning pretty intensely, I would say, and. Somebody phoned me and asked if I can give a shiur somewhere, and I was very hesitant because this was not part of my trajectory, really. It's not like I went to a coach who said, this is what you should be doing. Somebody asked me to give a weekly class in Tanya in Borough Park, and I'm like, please, you got the wrong guy, call someone else. A rabbi in Highland Park, Chicago, I still remember, his name is Rabbi Shanowitz, phoned me. My father had a Yiddish newspaper, and he asked me to write something on the Parsha every week, so I would. And this fellow says, I read your columns, and I want you to come to my community in Highland Park. It's a beautiful community, and inspire them for Shabbos. I said, you got the wrong number. I don't do that. I don't speak to audiences. I don't have what to say to them on Shabbos. He says, just say something of what you wrote on the Parsha. I'll pay your ticket. I'll pay your ticket. So I'm like, okay, I'll come. And I came, and I guess somebody liked it, because the next Shabbos I got an invitation from a rabbi in Great Neck. And as they say in English, the rest is history. So I guess I started to give more shiurim, and they were popular, and people loved it. And then people asked me to give speeches and do some Shabbatons. And then I was hired by Yeshiva in Brooklyn to give a shiur there every day, to be a Maggid shiur, to be a Maggid shiur there. So I would give a shiur Gemara, both in Iyun and in Pkiyas, Le'iyun and Le'girsa. And that happened for a few years. And then there was a shul there who was looking for a rabbi. So I served there for a few years. The name of the shul is Beis Shmuel in Brooklyn, New York. And that was my experience as a pulpit rabbi. So I guess it just morphed from one thing to another thing.
Yeah. What do you think, looking back, what do you think it was that they resonated with back then? That they kept on asking to come back, and another invitation. What was it that you were doing that in your mind that was working?
That's a very good question. You're making me think. Not such a bad thing for a rabbi once in a while to do. I would say a few things. Number one, I always try to make the material relevant to people's lives. Sometimes we can teach things, but they remain abstract. And I think the only way I could do it is if I make it relevant to myself. And when I say relevant, obviously if I'm teaching a practical halacha about how to do b'dikas chametz, it's relevant, how to do b'dikas chametz. But when we're talking about ideas in Chumash or Tanakh, right, or a sugya in Gemara, or ideas in machshava or hashkafa, or whatever it may be, sometimes we can share an idea, but it remains a little abstract or a little detached. I always try to make the idea relevant. Relevant means it should resonate deeply in my heart and my kishkas and my emotions, almost visceral. The body should be able to feel it. People should feel how this will impact my life today and tomorrow, which means practically. How will my marriage be enhanced? How will my relationship with my children be enhanced? How will my relationship with myself be enhanced? How can this be effective with my anxiety, with my fear, with my insecurity, with my emotional challenges, with my depression, with my despair, with my internal struggles, my mental struggles, my religious struggles, my spiritual struggles? I think when we speak on that level, when we communicate to audiences on that level, all the resistance melts. Literally, all the resistance melts. But the prerequisite is it has to be authentic. If I'm just, telling people what to do and how bad they are, I think we lose them. So I think something that was meaningful for people is I always tried to talk in a way that it meant a lot to me. And I was almost sharing, it was almost like sharing, almost like, you want to hear my conversation with myself? I'll share with you my conversation with myself. I'm not going to share with you every conversation I have with myself. Some of them are not maybe appropriate for the entire public, but I basically want to share, truths that touch me, that resonate with me, that affect me, that help me. And if they help me, they might be able to help you. I think that was one quality that people appreciated. Another quality is for me to talk about something, I need to be excited about the material. If it's just something, that is, it's a little boring, it's not so relevant to me, it's not exciting, it's not vibrant, then I myself don't want to share it. It's hard for me to share. I want to share something that I'm passionate about. It makes me feel alive. It challenges me. So obviously, I'll say things that I have said in the past. I'm not always saying new material, but I'm in the recycling business. But still as much as possible, and really, I would say I always try to do this, is I have to really feel. I have to have a feel for what I'm saying. I have to be excited about it. There's a beautiful medrash I once saw. I think it's Parshas Noach, somewhere in Bereshis, Medrash Rabbah. He says there that fishermen know that the best time to catch fish is after a rain. Because when it rains, the fish come to the surface. And the Medrash says, why? And the reason is because the fish are thirsty for the rainwater. Asks the Medrash, why are they thirsty? They're submerged in water 24/7. And the Medrash says, because they're looking for fresh water. They're looking for new water. The water in the ocean, in the sea, in the lake, they're familiar with. They're looking for that new vibrancy that's coming down in the new rain. And I've shared this with my students. I said, when you talk to people, give them fresh water. Give them rainwater. We're all like fish, like Rabbi Y.Y says in Maseches Brachos, right? We're all like fish in the water, but when there's rainwater, people aspire to it. So if they see you and it's just, you're just repeating yourself, it's almost like I have a job and I have to speak and I have to figure out what to say. It's like if you're falling asleep, I'm also falling asleep. But if I can hear the freshness, there's something creative, there's something new, there's something novel, I think it's very endearing to people and it stimulates our audiences. I think that's another point. It's probably a few more points, but that's what comes to mind now.
Yeah. Was that a mahalach that you felt you absorbed from the Rebbe, that he spoke about things that were important to people?
Yeah. Probably one of the lines that I heard most from the Rebbe was when he would speak about Torah. He would always say two things. He would say, Torah is Torah's Chayim. We say in the end of Shemoneh Esrei, right? Torah is Torah's Chayim. And he would always explain, Torah's Chayim doesn't mean just a Torah of life or a Torah about life. He says, the Torah is Torah's Chayim. It's a living Torah. It's a living Torah. If it's not living and pulsating and breathing, Zoisa Torah Adam, then you're not touching the Torah, because The Zohar says that Hashem created the world based on the blueprint of Torah. Stakel baraisa bar alma. The Medrash also says it. And therefore, the channel for the vitality of the universe is through Torah. So if I can't see in Torah, the DNA of the universe and of my own individual life, so then I'm detached from the authentic power of Torah. And the second thing he would quote is actually a Maharal and a Radak and a Zohar, who all say that the word Torah doesn't mean law. The word Torah comes from the word Hayra'ah, which means it's a lesson, it's an instruction, it's a blueprint, it's a roadmap. And his point was that there's nothing in Torah that is not part of a directive. That does not constitute a blueprint for the human life. In other words, I could be learning a sugya in Masechtas Chulin or Masechtas Erevin. I could be learning a Mishnah in Masechtas Ahalais or Masechtas Peah. So obviously there are halachic ramifications to each Mishnah. But his point was, if it's in Torah, it's always a hirah. It's a blueprint for life. So there's a roadmap. We're all navigating our journeys in life, individually and collectively, as people and as humans and as Jews, and individually, each one of us, as a member of society. And so today we have Waze and we have Google Maps, which really help us navigate those roads. And the point was that Torah is the ultimate, Waze, so to speak, or the ultimate GPS, God's positioning system. And every story in Torah captures another element of our journey in life, individually, collectively, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So this foundational idea, I think, was something I absorbed very deep into my bones from the Rebbe for many, many years. And I see the difference. I see the difference when I'm teaching Gemara, right? And we all know many sugyas of Gemara are not directly related to people's lives. My ox, I don't have an ox, and my ox didn't gore your cow. And, we're not fighting about if my ox did gore your cow, if the fetus was born before it gored it or after it was gored it. And most people I know aren't fighting with somebody over a talis, over a cloak. I'm just quoting, from Baba Mitzvah, whatever it may be. Like a lot of halachas may not be relevant, but the moment you tune into the soul behind that law, you can always find relevance. And this is discussed in many svarim, especially svarim of Pnimiyus HaTorah, Kabbalah, Chassidus, Machshavas svarim. So I think that is a very, very powerful tool to touch people very deeply.
Hey there, fellow podcast listeners. Are you enjoying the show so far? I hope you're finding value in all the insightful conversations coming your way, and I'm grateful for all the time we get to spend together. Now, I have a small favor to ask, one that can make a big difference. Your feedback is invaluable to me. By taking a moment to rate and review this podcast, you're not only showing your support, but also helping it reach new heights. Picture this. More reviews means more visibility. More visibility means more incredible guests lining up to share their stories and expertise with you. So, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, how about making some magic happen? Scroll down, tap that rating, jot down a few words. It's that simple. Your action today can pave the way for even greater experiences tomorrow. Thanks for your support. Now let's get back to the program.
Where did your trademark storytelling and humorous anecdotes and things like that, where did that come along on your speaking journey?
Yeah. So I've learned very early on the power of a story and the disarming impact of a good joke. When we get up to speak to an audience, naturally, the default mode is, why should I listen to this guy? Why? And I have, first of all, better things to do. I'm busy, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm bored. Why should I really listen to this person? That is the question we have to, all of us ask instinctively, especially if he's going to be giving an intense speech, and it may be longer than 2.5 minutes. So you really I should take my precious time and sit here and really suspend everything else and tune in to what you have to say. Could you give me a good reason for this? Every speaker who gets up needs to answer that question, because everyone in the audience is asking that question, consciously or unconsciously. Why do you feel your words are so important that I should sit here and really take my mind away from everything else and really tune into what you have to say? How we respond to that question is going to affect how the people listen to it. One very powerful element is humor. Humor basically teaches everybody in the room that we're all human. We can all cry about the same things and we all laugh about the same things. It's also disarming. It reduces the ego, the egoic effect of my ego versus your ego. With a joke, it's almost like we celebrate our human vulnerability. It shows that I don't take myself so seriously. So therefore, you can relax. You can open up. It also shows that we connect on a more simple level, human to human, heart to heart. That's the power of humor. Humor itself shouldn't be worshipped, meaning sometimes speakers get so carried away, the whole speech is just humor. It's just one joke, another joke, another joke, another joke, another joke. I understand that, and I can't say I never did that, but I think ultimately that's disrespectful to the speaker and even more disrespectful to the audience. If I'm going to hear a comedian, okay, fine, I'll buy a ticket and go listen to a comedian. Humor is really a vista, it's a portal, it's a shar, it's a gateway. It's a gateway to be able, the Gemara says in Maseches Shabbos, that Rava, there's two gerses, Rava or Rabba, before he would begin the shiur, right? Mekama de Pasach B'Shmaitze, he would begin with a milsa de b'dichasa. He would start with an anecdote or something humorous. Ubatchi Rabbanan, the rabbis would laugh or giggle. And then they would sit in awe and he would begin the shiur. What was the point? These are people who were coming to Rabba or Rava. You're talking about the G'dolei Hador, the greatest of the generation. Why do you have to begin with a joke? I understand I'm coming to a new audience. They don't know me. They don't trust me. I have to begin with a joke to schlep them in. What was the point? Why did the Rabba or Rava, again, there's two versions of the Gemara, Rabbi Chananel and the other gerses, why did he have to begin with the milsa? The b'dichasa, these were people who came to learn and they knew him. He had a reputation. They loved him. They respected him. They were in awe of him. The Gemara says in Brachas, when Rabba said he's a Beinani, he's not a tzaddik, Abaye said, you're not letting anybody live. Because like if you're a Beinani, you know we're all in bad shape. So obviously, Rabba, you're talking about Rabba or Rava? The answer is because the milsa de b'dichasa wasn't in order to gain their trust. They trusted him, they loved him, they revered him. The milsa de b'dichasa was to open them up. It opens somebody up, it opens up the brain, it relaxes, disarms us. The nervous system, when it's regulated, allows us to absorb much more material in our prefrontal cortex than if the nervous system is on edge. So the milsa de b'dichasa really, it just opens up. It creates also a connection from soul to soul, from human to human. And that's why it's not so much about the joke as much as it is about the trust and the connection. When people feel that you're connected to them, you're part of their world, you're part of their soul, their nervous system can be regulated, they can be more relaxed, and then all the information that you share will be absorbed much better. That's why it's also very important, I find, when people speak. Sometimes I find people get up to speak and they almost see themselves as being in a war zone, almost in combat with their audience, like they're fighting for their attention. So they'll start screaming right away or hollering right away. Or you could see their nervousness and the fact that they're not creating this loving kinship with their audiences. I think a much more powerful method is when we can really stand up and project love and project confidence and project kinship and project connection. I'm not here to preach to you. I'm not here to denigrate you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not even here to tell you what to do. I'm actually here to be an ambassador for love, light, hope, healing, truth, wisdom, authenticity, and redemptive consciousness. Would you allow me to go with you on this journey? I know these are maybe just words, but the energy that we radiate right when we get up is of a completely different magnitude and nature when we come from a place of almost like, I got to get these people. How do I do it? Or from a place of deep connection, of deep trust.
Wow. I've never heard it described that way. You reminded me of like the Gemara talks about there's something that someone would eat to open up the bnei ma'ayin. They'd open up their appetite. The same way joke, it opens up the nervous system like you're describing.
Yeah.
And so where
you want to put people at ease so that they can really, really be open to beautiful ideas, to especially, if they're hopefully life-changing ideas or at least meaningful ideas.
So where did you find these stories? Where did you go curating these jokes and funny anecdotes and things like that?
I can't say that I went anywhere specific to collect jokes and stories. I think it happened and happens more organically. I guess my ear is always and has always been sensitive to stories and to anecdotes. So if I hear a story and it touches me, I know that this is a story that will touch other people. So I may repeat it a few times so I could remember it. I may type it up and put it in my computer file so I have it on file, which, by the way, is a good idea for rabbis and teachers generally. And I learned this idea years later, and I regret it, because if I would have done it in the beginning, it would have saved me a lot of time. But if you give a good shiur on Parshas Bereishis, right, make a file in your computer called Bereishis, Noach, Lech Lecha, Vayera, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos, Lag BaOmer, Tu B'Shvat, Purim. And if you gave a good shiur on it, or you found a great story, put it there. Because in 3 years, Pesach or Parshas Bereishis, you won't remember what you said. Maybe you'll remember something, but you won't remember all the details, and you worked on it, right? We don't realize, like I prepared so many shiurim, and I gave them, and I didn't realize that in 5 years, I won't remember my structure. Maybe I'll remember the idea. And I looked up a lot of svarim. Put it in your files. You can't go wrong. In 5 years from now, you're going to go back to Parshas Lech Lecha and you say, hey, wow, that was an excellent shiur. I have a bris this morning, or I have my weekly Parsha shiur this morning, or my weekly women's class this morning, or my Shabbos sermon, and this is great material, maybe one point of it. So I think, if I hear a good story, a very good story, I may file it, I may write it down myself, I may repeat it to somebody. And just over the years, I guess, people have shared with me a lot of stories. A lot of stories are personal stories, meaning people that I encounter, people who email me, because I get a lot of emails. So a lot of stories are just from personal experiences that people share, and those are the most powerful stories. There's no story like the story of people's real life, here and now. Today I gave a shiur this morning to women on Pesach, and I was in Israel last week. So I shared a conversation I had with a bereaved father in Israel. I didn't have to think about the fact that I needed to tell that story. I was trying to bring out a point, and I remembered the conversation with him, and I realized that's going to illustrate it. So on all levels, the level of attention of the people was enhanced significantly, because this was an experience I had last week in the Holy Land about a bereaved father who lost his son in the horrible war in Israel. And it was a very moving thing that he shared with me. There's nothing that touches people that way, and it brings it home. Remember also, stories tell people that this is not a heavenly idea. It's a real idea. It happened. It's happening. It's changing people's lives. Look how this person responded to this situation. Look how this person reacted or behaved under these circumstances. That's what a story does. A story makes it real for me, because it's not only the story about Yankel or Zelig or Dvar or Chaya. A story means, like the Gemara has an expression of Baba Basra, Maisa Rav. There's nothing as powerful as the Maisa, right? If I heard my Rebbe say something, it's great, but I don't know how he would behave in the circumstance practically. Maybe there's other things that come into play. Maisa, the fact that this was the Maisa and this is what happened, Rav, like that's the Makabapatish. Also emotionally, the fact that it happened, Maisa, right? Lo Yamed Shikar El Maisa means it's real, and I could learn from it. Also, stories remove the effect of egotism and judgmentalism, because the story is never about me preaching to you. I'm not preaching. I'm not pontificating. I'm not telling even. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm sharing a story. In other words, we're both learning from a particular person or persons or individuals. So it's almost they're giving the shiur through the story. In a way, when I tell a story, I'm not the teacher anymore. I'm the student. We're both learning from the person, from the hero of this particular story. So many ways, I am not teaching you. I'm a student like you. I'm just a microphone. I'm just a channel telling you the story. So the story has an impact on many, many different levels. So it's really, I don't know that I have a magical trick for this. It's just really picking up and wherever you can, and And the most important thing is retaining it, because we all hear good stories, but a week later we forget those stories. So if you hear a story and you are a teacher, you're a rabbi or you're a teacher, you're a mechanech, a rebbe, whatever it is, when you hear a story and there's material here that is enriching for people, and that's your bread and butter, it's worthwhile to create a strategy and a mechanism of how to retain it.
Yeah. So what would you say to, sometimes people struggle with storytelling. They'll include too many details, or when they finish, they kind of fizzles out, and they tell you something like, I guess you had to be there. How do you instruct somebody to become a better storyteller? The story happened. It's a good story. They just can't give it over in an impactful type of way.
Right.
So what you would recommend?
In terms of personal relationships, every person, I guess, does what works for them. In terms of giving a speech, it's very important to know how to tell a story, because that makes it or breaks it. If I tell the story and it's never ending, and I keep on making mistakes, and I'm like, oh no, it didn't happen Tuesday, it happened Monday. Oh wait, no, it happened Tuesday. I don't know when it happened. You know what? Let me check my text. It happened Sunday. Oh my, do me a favor. It's good. You're honest. You're trying to be accurate. I appreciate it, but it's not for a speech. Figure out the date before. And if you're not sure, you could say it happened Monday or Tuesday. I'm not telling you to exaggerate or lie or dramatize. And by the way, I should say this. I learned this as I get older, the importance of accuracy. I didn't realize this when I was young. I just thought I have a good story. Today I'm much more careful, because I once shared a story. It went viral. Somebody made a song based on the story. And then people started to challenge me about the source of the story. And I went back to the source and I couldn't verify it. I saw it in a book. I went back to the publisher. We heard it. And I realized it's probably fictional. And it hurt me. It hurt me because, I don't want to have to sell lies, even if it's a good story. I'll tell you, I don't mind saying it's a metaphor. I'm fine with that. I'm fine giving metaphors. But I do think stories should be accurate. It doesn't mean we shouldn't, accentuate details that make the story alive. I do it constantly. I zoom in on details because I want to bring out the richness of the story. But it's important when you tell a story, I think, a few things. Number one, to be able to zoom in on the details that will make it a living experience. When I tell a story, I want you to be there. I want you to be there. I want you not just to be sitting in my class. I want you inside the story. I want you in that environment, in that space, in that time, in that dilemma. You know why? Because when you're in that story, it becomes your story. And if it becomes your story, it changes you. It doesn't only change me. How do we tell a story in that way? So first of all, we have to know which details to accentuate. We have to understand that if I don't have the story clear and it's not going to come out smooth, people are going to get interrupted by my own interruption, and they're not going to be able to experience it that way. So that's why when we tell a story, it's extremely important to be able to do it in a way that allows people to get a visceral, personal, intimate experience of it. And that may mean that some details I'm not going to focus on, or at least focus on for a long time. Some details I need to emphasize. If there's something unsure that I'm unsure, I could say I'm unsure about this detail, but not to start getting caught up in details that in a personal conversation would be fine, but in a public presentation is going to, ruin the thunder.
Yeah. And what about the ending, in terms of how to end, or how to, I guess, how to get out of the story and into the nimshal? What's a good way for people to do that? How do you know how to?
When taking off and flying, taking off is very important, and landing is very important, and the flight itself is very important. And we judge good pilots by takeoff, but also by landing. The same is true in a speech. Taking off is very important. Don't only look at the journey, at the flight. You have to take off, and you have to help people. You're taking people off the ground onto a journey. Taking off is important. The flight is important, and then landing is very important. Landing is, what am I leaving them with? What are they going home with? The same is true when I finish a story. How am I landing from that story? And that's why the punchline of the story is very critical. What we call in Mishnayos language, makabapatish. You know, the makabapatish, like what's the message? How does that story end? For example, if I'm telling a story and then the story ends and it's very anticlimactic, it's like, I don't know, I guess it worked out. Like, what do you want from the people? No, not I guess it worked out, you know. Tell me what happened. I told today in my class a story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Bergen-Belsen baking matzah for Pesach. Okay? I'm giving you an example. He got permission from a Nazi commander to bake matzah for Pesach. There's a Lubavitcher Rebbe, his name was Rabbi Yisrael Spira. He lost his wife and family in the Holocaust. He died in 1989. He was 100 years old or 99 years old. And he bakes matzah in Bergen-Belsen. A Nazi comes, smashes the oven, he's only left with a dozen matzah, and they have to distribute it between a lot of Jews who want matzah, so he decides, naturally, to distribute it to people who are obligated to eat matzah, which means people over bar mitzvah. And there's a woman who protests, and there's a woman who says, no, binoreinu ubiskeinenu. Moshe says to Paro, we're going to go out with our youth before we're going to go out with our elderly. We need the children to eat matzah. She argues with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he agrees. And he distributes matzah to the children in Bergen-Belsen instead. Okay? It's a beautiful, beautiful story. But that's not what caught the people most. What caught the people most is that after the war, they both survive, and he marries this woman. Her name is Rebbetzin Brunya Spiro. She's the second wife of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, because the first one was murdered in the Holocaust. So this woman who protested his decision in Bergen-Belsen to distribute matzah to the adults, she says the children are the main thing. After the war, they end up marrying each other. I finished that story. I finished it. The story speaks for itself. I wanted to give a lesson from the story. So after I finished the story, and it was a crowd of women, so it was very moving for them specifically, because this was a woman who spoke up to the Rebbe, and then he ends up marrying her. Like, this is his soulmate. She protests his decision, and then he says, you know, this is my wife. And they marry each other, and they reestablish a family after the war. I now turn to the women and I say, you know, what does this woman teach us? This woman teaches us that we never, ever let go of our children. Ever. Binoreinu biskinenu. We don't say, you know, they're children, they're going to grow up, or this child I can't deal with. Because the theme of my class was how we have to address all the 4 children in our families, in our homes, in our communities. So I wanted to bring home that lesson. This woman was teaching us in Bergen-Belsen, each child is a priceless gem, and our responsibility and our privilege is to embrace him or her and be there for them in their journey. So you want to make sure to complete your story. You want to make sure to complete it in a way that has a resonance to the people listening to it. And if necessary, you want to be able to bring that back and show people what they could take out of the story. Sometimes it's unnecessary, but usually you may want to highlight a point or 2 or 3 of how people can take that home with them.
Yeah. I'm curious, you reminded me of the story of the Maggid, the Maggid of Dubno, who with the bullseye and the arrows. Where the question is what comes first? Does the story come first, or does the
Dubno Maggid? Yeah.
So what is it with you, or is it a mix?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I would say it depends on the structure. It depends on the format. Meaning, if it's a situation, where somebody asks me just to say, a short, nice vart, maybe I'm visiting a particular home or event, it's just really a short thing, and I heard a good story. So yeah, I'll say, you know what, this is a beautiful story, and then I'll find a message. But usually if I'm giving a class or a sermon or a presentation, usually there's an idea that I want to convey. And then I'll have to find a story that will suit it. But yeah. I think, sometimes a person hears a story and it's a very meaningful story. It's an inspirational story. And I don't think there's anything, I don't think a person has to feel guilty like, oh, I didn't even have an idea. I just had a story. So what? You had a story, and the story is impactful, and the story has a good message. Yeah. Not every rabbi or teacher is responsible to create an original sermon and an original class every single time, most of us would be out of business. So you have a good story. I think it's particular. It's it's completely fair. Personally, I would say for most of my classes, I don't do it that way. I have an idea, and then I have a story.
Yeah. Okay. I know we're running out of time. I just a couple more minutes. I wanted to ask you. So what would you say is maybe the big difference between the time you spent as a rabbi, as as a darshan, and the time that you're spending now as a speaker, where you're dropping into audiences that they know you, but you don't know them, and you have to connect with them and leave them with something impactful, versus having a pulpit where you address the same people every week.
Right. So I think there's an advantage and a disadvantage in each, and I want to bring that out because I think it's important for people to understand. The advantage of having a pulpit where we address the same people, or more or less the same people every week, is that there's an element of trust. There's a personal, vulnerable connection there. Our pulpit rabbi has been there with his crowds, with his constituents, with his congregation and community through thick and thin. He's married off their children, and he's buried their parents or grandparents. He's been there with them in times of celebration, and God forbid, in times of grief and mourning. He's counseled them through ups and downs in their marriage, and through other tumultuous junctures and journeys in their life. He's been there as their children were born, and as their children were bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. He's been there with them when they had to make difficult decisions, or when they went through a financial or emotional, psychological crisis. I'm talking about a classic pulpit rabbi. So when this rabbi gets up to speak, there is an element of intimacy. In a way, he's a father or grandfather or Rebbe or Rav for these people, in a way that there is already a very deep connection. So that, in many ways, allows it already to be a much profounder experience. He knows the people by name. He knows many of the people intimately. He knows their life story. So there's already a sense of trust and connection. Of course, I'm assuming that there's a good relationship between the rabbi and the congregation. I know sometimes it could be difficult with some people, and some congregations are not that easy, and some boards are not that easy, but assuming that there's generally a positive vibe and a positive relationship. So when the rabbi gets up to speak, there is that sense of connection that already exists. Still, I can get up and say nothing and just say, you guys are great, and I'm here for you, and I love you, and I cherish you. I mean, it's good to say that, but, it's important to communicate a message. But I think that element is very, very powerful because there's a connection, there's trust. In many ways, there is family. There's an element of family. And that sometimes means that the rabbi doesn't have to begin with a joke or a story, because you know me, and you know that I'm going to have what to tell you, and you know that we're in it together, and we trust each other, and I don't want to waste your time, and you don't want to waste my time, and I want you should come out of this enriched. It doesn't mean the rabbi shouldn't tell a joke or a story, but it means you have a certain luxury because you can get up and just be direct and be personable. When I'm coming to a new audience, they don't know me, I don't know them. So in many ways, there's an element of distance, there's an element of authority here that comes from a place of distance. And not an element of authority, but there's a distance here. And as a result of that, I need a bridge. I need to bridge that gulf. There is an element and an advantage in that. And the advantage in that is that, this is a new audience. So it's a new audience, what I said last Shabbos in Shul, and what I said the previous Shabbos in Shul, I could take, 3 of my best ideas and just bring it in here. In my Shul, I'm talking to them every single Shabbos. So I think there's advantages and disadvantages. I think a common denominator, though, that is extremely important is that when somebody gets up to speak, we should realize that this is a divine gift to affect people in a very, very positive way. In other words, a rabbi shouldn't look at it and say, part of my job is to give a sermon, so what am I going to say in the next 15 minutes? That's not how it works. If you have nothing to say, don't say it. It's the contrary. I was given a gift that I can touch people in a very real and authentic way. I want to use that gift in a very powerful way. Remember also something else. If I hear something from somebody in a speech or a shiur that changes the way I look at myself, or the way I look at something going on in my life, or the way I look at my relationship with a loved one, that connection with that person is eternal. And therefore, we have to cherish that potential and that responsibility. If you're getting up and you're going to say something that will affect how people relate to their spouse, or their children, or God, or life. That connection is eternal. You are their Rebbe. You have touched them in a very deep place in their soul, and it's an impact that has eternal ramifications, because it may continue for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, till 120, till 180. So realize how titanic, how gigantic that is. Don't take it for granted. It's a very, very powerful moment. They are entrusting you with their time, with their soul, with their heart, with their body, with their soul, with their nefesh. Utilize it, make the best of it. Honor it, cherish it with humility and creativity. Cherish that gift.
Beautiful. Yeah, amazing. If I could ask you one last question, you could answer it as quickly as you want, which is, how do you deal with the phones? How do you, when you get up to speak, and not talking about Shabbos and Yom Tov, obviously, but during the week when you speak in front of a crowd, how do you deal with people always, going to their phones, checking their phones? How do you compete with that?
That's a very good question. How do you compete with phones? How do you compete with waiters coming in and out? How do you compete with people, falling asleep and snoring? There's a lot of different distractions. Sometimes there are distractions that are unbearable, and they're going to undermine the speech. So, for example, if I'm at a dinner and suddenly, 70 waiters walk in and start giving out, cheesecake or chicken, it's just going to be impossible. I'm not going to be able to create a vibe, right? So that's why I will tell the organizers, please, when I get up, no waiters coming in, no waiters going out, because it's going to disturb. But the fact that different people will take out their phones and do their own thing, these are not things that have to undermine the speech. This is about my own attitude. So it's really realizing, everyone who's there has a life. Everyone who's there has their own responsibilities and their own journeys. I don't have to assume anything. I don't even know why he's taking out his phone. And it's really not so relevant to me. I think a person, a speaker, a teacher needs to remain focused on their job. I want to show up in the best way I can, be the best version of myself, and give you what I can give you with the tools that I have today. How people accept it, how people embrace it, how people react to it, that's their story. To make their story my story becomes very overwhelming, and I don't think it has a positive impact. It's also, it touches on something else, the issue of perfectionism. Some teachers and speakers, I need that perfect speech, and if I don't give a perfect speech, I can't speak. And then they're sitting 4 nights before. They can't sleep, they can't eat, they can't be there for their kids, they can't take a walk, they can't relax, they can't exercise because they're overwhelmed with the speech. Now, I understand the pressure. It's a big audience. You want to make a good impression, but you don't have to be so cruel to yourself, because if your objective is perfectionism, you are destined to failure constantly, because nobody is perfect, including you or me or anybody. And that means you will always find flaws and mistakes in your speech, and there will always be an internal critic who will tell you how bad you are and you should never do this, and why did I become a rabbi? I should have been a dentist, I should have had a grocery store, I should have been a mechanic, maybe a lawyer. I don't like this, and who are these people to tell me anyway what to do and what to say and what not to say? A much healthier attitude, and I know it's easier said than done, because usually these attitudes come from a very deep place within our souls, is Hashem has put me here today and given me a gift that I can be an ambassador for Torah, for mitzvahs, for truth, for godliness, for wisdom, for Avos Hashem, for Avos HaTorah, for Avos Yisrael. I can be an ambassador of love, light, hope, healing, inspiration, wisdom, authenticity, limud HaTorah, emunah, achdus. And I am going to show up today with the tools that I have right now in the best way I can to be that channel. Tomorrow, I may acquire new tools. Tomorrow, I may look back and say, should have said that. I forgot that. Okay, yeah, I should have said that. I forgot that. It was not perfect. But I'm going to show up with the tools that I have today. I don't have to own the outcome. I don't have to be in control of what people are going to say and what people are not going to say. Of course, it's nice to get positive feedback, but I don't have to be in control of that. What I do want to do is show up as best as I can with the tools that I have today to be this channel. And when we do that, the pressure is reduced. And you will see it's very, very interesting, because actually when we come with that approach, people can absorb the material much better, because they don't feel that you're controlling. They feel your humility. And the more they feel my humility, the more they can internalize it. The more they feel that it's about them, not about me, it's not about my ego, the more they're going to internalize it. That takes, though, a lot of inner work, because if I'm really, we develop different coping mechanisms. And if my coping mechanism in life is that I got to be perfect, and I got to get compliments from everybody, and I got to get your validation, and everybody in the audience needs to love me, it's a very, very difficult job. It's a very difficult job, because I will never, ever be able to be relaxed. I will never, ever be able to forgive my mistakes. And I will always be craving for the compliment of the next guy. So what did you say about the speech? So what did you say? So what did you say? What did you say? I have this inner emptiness and void that nobody's going to be able to fill. The only one who could fill it is me. So, this is something that I've learned over the years, and something I worked on, and I still work on it. I wasn't born with this. I dealt with these struggles. But I realized, the more we can show up with that sense of, I know who I am, and this is not about me getting compliments from you. Feedback is very good to teach us, where we can become better, where we can enhance. But if the feedback is going to make me, and the criticism is going to break me, then my existence is so fragile. So fragile. So a person needs to get up with a real presence. This is who I am, and I have the zchus today to be a shliach of Hashem, and that's what I'm going to try to do with the tools that He has given me today, to the best of my ability.
Well, thank you so much. I believe you've accomplished that today. So, and we've recorded it for posterity. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where can I send people to?
The yeshiva.net basically is a website that loads many, I would say most of my classes and shiurim and lectures and essays. There's also my YouTube channel, Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, or the podcasts or Spotify of the yeshiva.net, with a lot of shiurim that people can have access to.
Okay, wonderful.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. There's a secret that great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid Method of Public Speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid Method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now.